Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how you can view your webcam modeling career as a system in order to get more consistent results and ultimately make more money. So systems thinking, if we just define what that is first, it's an approach to problem solving that focuses on understanding how the different parts of a complex whole are interconnected and influence each other. So it sounds a bit confusing at first, but I'm going to break it down through this diagram and help you understand it properly. So this is the system as a whole, and these four parts here are the parts that you interact with directly. This is the system, and then all systems operate within an environment. So in the case of webcam modeling, the environment would consist of things like seasonality, well, the things that affect the environment that you operate within are things like seasonality, economic cycles, algorithm changes on the site themselves, changes on the site that aren't algorithm, like user interface changes, advertising changes, increasing, decreasing competition, and then overall site dynamics. So the core principle of all of this is to achieve consistent outputs, which is what all webcam models want, really. Consistent, profitable outputs. To achieve consistency, you have to have consistent inputs. So in a system, if you're putting inconsistent inputs into it, you're very unlikely to achieve consistent outputs. So first of all, if we just compare this to, let's say, baking a cake or cooking a meal, something like that, then if you're making a cake and you're using different ingredients or different quantities, different qualities of ingredients every time you're making that cake, it's going to be a different cake every time, regardless of how you make the cake. So your like skill level of making cakes, being a chef, being a cook, I'm not sure which one, but regardless of how good you are at making cakes, if you have different inputs every time, the process of making the cake is the same, but the inputs are different, then the outputs will always be different. So you can't expect to have consistent outputs without consistent inputs. But the good thing is the inputs are stuff that you 100% control. So you have full control over all of the inputs in webcam modeling. So such as the consistency of your schedule, the hours that you stream, your prices, your mindset when you show up. There's a full list of inputs, but they are all things that you control. And then the processes, this is essentially the tactics and strategies. So you can view this as just your skill level as a webcam model. So webcam modeling is a skill and it's something that you can get better at. And it's essentially how you take those inputs, how you process them, and how you convert them into outputs. So you can be as consistent as you want, showing up at the same time every day, logging off at the same time every day. But if you don't have a good skill level as a webcam model, you don't know how to convert those inputs into outputs, then once again, it's not just going to be, well, it could be consistent, but it's not going to be consistently what you want. It could be consistently bad. So if you have consistent inputs going into a bad process, then you're going to have consistently bad outputs. But if you have consistently good inputs going into a consistently good process, which is you on stream, then you're going to have consistently good outputs, which is money. So money being the main tangible output that obviously we're optimizing for here. So like with making a cake, if you have consistent ingredients, but you're not good at making cakes, then you're going to have consistently bad cakes. If you're good, then you're going to have consistently good cakes, but at least it will be consistent. That's the main thing. So the main thing of consistent outputs is to have consistent inputs, and then you can improve the process. But if it's inconsistent, then you don't really know what's going on. So that is that. And then the feedback. So this is tracking and analysis. So if you're not tracking the outputs and you're not tracking the inputs as well, if you're not tracking the entire system and you're not analyzing the data that you're tracking, then you don't know what changes that you need to make, and you don't know what's working and you don't know what's not working. So you can see here, this is the outputs feed into the feedback, which then feeds into the inputs. So this is a continuous cycle of inputs, process, output, feedback, which then feeds back into the inputs. So this step is crucial, because if you don't conduct this feedback stage, then you can't make the appropriate changes to the inputs and the processes. So you cannot improve, and you don't know what's working and what's not working. So the feedback is a very important stage. All models should be tracking and analyzing data from their streams, the inputs, the processes, and the outputs. It allows you to build this full picture of what is actually going on. So this system is these four parts here are the parts that you interact with, and then that system, all systems operate within an environment. So the environment in this case, being the environment as a whole. So everything that affects the sites and people's spending behavior, everything outside of your control, effectively. So you cannot control and you cannot directly influence the environment, but what you can do is you can change the stuff that you can control in response to the environment. So things like seasonality, if the rooms are getting quieter, you can adjust your strategy to optimize for that. Algorithm changes, you can once again adjust your strategy, adjust your inputs, adjust your process to maintain your outputs or to improve your outputs. Same with competition. That you have to understand the stuff that you cannot control, how that interacts with the stuff you can control, and then what you can do about that. A lot of models get polarized, I think, between fully blaming stuff on themselves and fully blaming stuff on the environment. But you have to understand that both parts play a huge role in the output. So you can have consistent inputs, you can have consistent process, and you can be getting consistent outputs one week, but something can change which is outside of your control, and that can massively affect the outputs. A lot of models will then think, oh, immediately jump to the conclusion of they're doing something wrong, so they need to change everything. But that's often not the case. And then the same works the other way, where something's going well one week, and then the outputs change the following week, but the model doesn't understand that she's changed something in the inputs of the processes and immediately jumps to the conclusion or blames the environment for the change of outputs. So you have to understand how this all interconnects with each other so that you can correctly diagnose what has happened, essentially. So you can understand, is this something I've changed with the inputs or the process, or is this something that's changed in the environment? If you know that your inputs are the same and you're tracking to see that you haven't changed the inputs, the time that you're starting is the same, the time you're finishing is the same, the process is the same, you're following the same strategy, you're following the same frameworks, how you're interacting with viewers, it's all the same, nothing's changed. Then you can start to look into the environment and think about, well, what's changed in the environment, because something has changed in this system. The system doesn't just change itself. The output doesn't just, something has to affect the output. It's just cause and effect, essentially, is what this entire systems diagram represents, is that for every effect, there must have been a cause for that somewhere. And viewing the webcam model in this way allows you to see the whole picture and think, is this me or is this an environment problem? And then the important part is to not, if it is an environment problem, you don't want to just say, oh, well, nothing I can do about that. You then need to adapt your system in response. So The goal here is to keep the outputs consistent. So if something in the environment changes, you need to adapt the inputs, or you need to adapt the processes so that you can maintain the outputs, and not just maintain, but grow them over time. So the whole aim of this is consistency, because you need consistent results. But what you have to understand is that you're not going to get consistent results day to day. So if you're consistently putting in the same inputs and you're following the same process, but the day-to-day earnings are not consistent, that is completely normal in an industry with so much variance, essentially. So it's very unlikely that you're going to have day-to-day earnings that are just, $100, $100, $100, or $500, 500, or 1,000 and 1,000. It's very unlikely. You're going to have highs and you're going to have lows, but the important part is consistency over time, not consistency day to day. So you're going to have these random spikes of earnings, and it's gonna look something like this day to day. That was a bit of an exaggeration at the end there, but over time, you're going to have this consistent uptrend of earnings, and it's going to be consistent over time, but you're not going to have consistent day-to-day earnings. It's very unlikely. So you shouldn't expect that. This is probably a bit of an exaggeration and not a very good drawing, but hopefully that makes the point clear, because you want your earnings over time to regress towards this mean, which is a consistent uptrend. That's the ideal scenario. But you can't judge consistency based on the day-to-day earnings, which is why it's important to track and analyze so that you can see the overall trend and see what's happening and adjust accordingly. So if you found this video helpful and you like this kind of content breaking down the actual mechanics of webcam modeling, and you want more frameworks and systems and theories like this, then I'll be posting more stuff like this on this channel. And if you want to learn even more, then there is a link in the description to our 4-week accelerator program. So click that if you want more information about that. But if not, no problems, and hope you have a good week streaming.